Back with another episode of the Blue Turf. This is Thad Bell. With me, I have Eric Bergrud. We are not at the world famous Kansas City Soccer Dome.
Just didn't work out that way. It's not that we don't love being there, scheduling and opportunity.
Yeah, and it's actually I'm going to take all the blame. I was a little under the weather yesterday, and I try to stay away from players when I might have something contagious. I figure it's better if they are perfectly at their peak health.
I'm sure Comets fans appreciate that, Thad.
Yeah, maybe I should go visit the Chihuahua players first.
That's a theory. I'm not sure when they're flying in, but they tend to not be last minute travelers. So that's going to be quite the game this coming Saturday. But we have a previous game to talk about.
We do a loss at San Diego. It's been a few days, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But drop points. Where did they go wrong?
Yeah, what's tricky about watching a game online and not being in the arena is you see what you see from the camera perspective. You can't necessarily hear what's going on, and depending on how you view the game, you see a certain angle. There are a couple things that bothered me in what I was able to see. Craig Shiles was wide open on a couple goals where it's hard to know whether it was miscommunication in the back, etc. But nobody should be that wide open for tapping goals on the back post, and that's something I'm sure they dealt with in practice after they got back home. You're going to have penalties. Ironically, with the Neto rule, Neto got to go in when Ejimadu had to serve. It just wasn't a performance that they expected, and not a performance that's going to win you a championship. And so they do have an opportunity coming up next month. San Diego will be back here in Kansas City to get some payback at 3 points. But you start looking at the standings now, Thad. For the longest time, the Comets were number one or one or two, and now they're at five. And so every miss of 3 points gets you that further away from first place.
Yeah, they've dropped down to fifth. They have Milwaukee and Baltimore pretty much right ahead of them with same number of games played, but Milwaukee 2 points up, Baltimore 3 points up. So they have an opportunity to make some ground when they play those teams again, but it's a little disappointing for probably fans at this moment. Again, we know that they have the potential to play better. We know last year they made some changes midway through the season and became better. I don't know if they got anything planned right now, but we will have to see.
Yeah, I mean, this is the big test of the year coming up. So
Yep.
I think before anybody gets into panic mode, this is the game that's been circled on the calendar. This will be the real test of how good this Comets team is against not only the defending champions, but also a team the Comets have never beaten. This will be the proof point. And so I think in next week's episode, we can then take stock in terms of where they are. Do they need to change it all? Is everything okay? Is everybody happy or what? But right now, um, there's some room for concern. What's interesting is we're recording this on Thursday. My 10 for 10 interview with Ian Bennett dropped earlier this afternoon, and he made a comment that teams right now don't know how good they are. And it's only until you get towards the playoffs that you have a sense of, can we make a deep run? Can we do this? And so I think with the Comets, we saw this last year. There was a period in the middle of the season where nothing was going right. I don't think that's where the Comets are at right now,
No.
but you have an opportunity to get 3 points. Milwaukee is playing at Utica City FC twice this weekend. There will be some shifting in the standings between 4 through 6. And if you're the Comets, you want to be a positive shift, not a negative shift.
Look, I'm always I always try to come down on the side of wanting to root for my local teams, but I also try to be very objective. Right now, if I was a betting man, would I say they were going to beat Chihuahua? Probably not. Okay, it's just reality, right? Chihuahua is really good. They've never been able to beat them. All these factors come into play. I'm not saying they can't, because I would love to see that. But if I was a betting man, I don't know that I would be able to think that they're going to pull that off.
I'm on the other side, but we'll see. I mean, I think that they took Chihuahua, yeah, and controlled the scoreboard most of the time, lost in both, but Comets could have, should have won the championship series. So this is a team that knows that, save for a few mistakes, we would be having a different conversation right now.
True.
And so if you can't get up for this game, you can't really get up for any game.
And I don't think that they're not going to get up for it. I just because of just overcoming that Chihuahua thing. If they do, then they have a bright future for the rest of the season. I mean, they do. But we all, and again, we look at these games ahead of time, and I know you always side on the you got to go win these games, and I kind of on the other side of these are tough teams. You can't win all of those games, but they do need to win some of them. They didn't
Yep.
win against San Diego on the road. They do need to win. I don't want to say they need to win. It's not a must win, although we've discussed that many times. But if you can get that win against Chihuahua this weekend, it's a big step.
Well, where I was last week was they needed four from these two games. And clearly, if you can do some math, four is not possible. They needed to get some result in San Diego. Now the question is, how do you salvage three? Because if you don't get 3 points, uh, it starts getting harder and harder.
It does. They can still make a lot of ground though, through the rest of the games. It's again, Chihuahua's always been, they're a top team. San Diego's always a top team. Those are two teams that's always going to be hard to beat.
What's funny is there's been so much back and forth on social media about who should be on the All-Star team and who isn't. And ironically, Chihuahua only has one All-Star who, for me, was one of the reasons why they won the series last year. That's Roberto Escalante, who not only blocks a lot of shots, but he scores a lot of goals too. He
Yeah.
has 7 goals on the season. So this is your prototypical two-way player. If you look at this lineup, and we never know who's going to be on the travel squad, but there's so many people who can score goals that Chihuahua is in essence an all-star team.
I know I'm really surprised they didn't have at least a couple more, but it's not me who got a vote, so
They have three quality goalkeepers. I mean, quality goalkeepers, and three guys who have at least 10 goals already this season. So that's goal a game. That's pretty impressive.
no, totally agree. I agree. It's surprising that they don't have more, but I think it's familiarity. I think it's how people know people. It's an all-star thing. It's who you want to see. It's things like that. So that always
True.
comes down to any all-star game where they have votes. But this one you would hope would be more accurate because there was players and coaches and staff members voting on this.
Yeah, I think the danger with Chihuahua, and people want to attribute everything to Sport Arena. And of course, they are dominant there and they score a ton of goals there. But this is a team that is a really good road team, too. Their
Yep.
only loss on the road was at San Diego. They're 9-1. Most of the games have been at home, so their schedule was a little bit front loaded. But this is a team that doesn't go on the road afraid of the competition. They go on the road and expect to win. And we've seen that every time Chihuahua's coming to Kansas City.
Yeah, they're just I mean they're good. It's all top to bottom, back to front, however you want to say. They're good.
Yep.
It should be a interesting game though. I don't expect it to be a runaway with either side. So
No, I think this is a game that you want to watch, because these are teams that both believe that they could win the championship this year, and that's what you want to see on the field.
yeah, I would imagine this would be a game that a casual fan would want to watch.
I would think so. And what's interesting is all 12 teams are going to be playing on Saturday night, and this is the only game on CBS Sports Golazo. So we're excited to have that privilege. Championship rematch. It's going to be something.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, it'll be fun. All right. Lots of news around the league lately.
Where do you want to start? It's been a week, Thad.
It has. Let's see. I know a few days ago I'm sitting there. I wasn't watching the game live, but all of a sudden I'm like, what's going on, man? I see everything popping up all over the place about fights and people chasing people down hallways and let's see. I don't know if you probably know the stuff off the top of your head, but
Yeah, no, and what's funny is I made a comment, my standard NPSL rules comment, and some Milwaukee fans weren't happy with me and expressed their direct displeasure on social media. I mean,
Milwaukee fans being unhappy with you, Eric, that's really a
yeah, it's
first.
just par for the course. So, which ironically, hey, palate cleanser, you get my interview with Ian Bennett today, so at least give me some grace for a little bit. Um, there's a lot of he said in this.
Yep.
Milwaukee fans were never going to be happy with what the league was going to come up with in terms of discipline on this. We're never going to be happy on and on social media that's become pretty clear. So versions of the story include some very hostile comments made attributed to Tacoma defender Steph Mijatovic. Milwaukee assistant coach was involved in this. One of their defenders was involved in this. There was pushing on the field. You had players jump in, including Derek Huffman, who, like Mijatovic, is on probation already, which factored into some of the league decisions, which included 4 game suspension for Mijatovic. He will be back in time for the All-Star game, but as you've noticed and other people noticed, his first game back, assuming that he serves a suspension, which includes an anger management course, is the rematch against the Wave. So that'll be interesting. It'll also be interesting to see who Ryan Sigich assigns to that game because this would be very much a game I could see if he's available. Shane Butler coming in as somebody who's going to be ready to throw a bunch of cards if things get out of hand. You have Milwaukee heading into Utica this weekend for 2 games there. No assistant coach, no Huffman for either because Huffman got a red card plus an extra game because of his probation.
The probation
And
bonus.
yeah, probation bonus. And then Q, I believe, got 1 game too. And so they're going to be a little shorthanded heading in. This could cut both ways. They could rally and say, "Hey, we got done wrong, and we're going to take it out on UCFC," or this could go in the other different direction. They're playing a UCFC team that has sorely missed Kelvin Oliveira, who is back, by the way, and so something that the Comets fans are going to want to watch. For Tacoma, no Mijatovic for 4 games, and this team has not been playing well lately. Mijatovic was out for a while because he was playing in Italy, representing USA in the Kings World Cup competition. But he was back for this game against Milwaukee, and then the fracas took place.
It was exciting. Probably got the fans all riled up. Not what the league wants to see though, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, ultimately, you want competition to dictate how you're perceived on the field, but uh, things were said, tempers were raised, and behaviors are going to be corrected. Well, let me rephrase that. There's going to be an attempt by the league to correct behavior from happening again. We'll see if it's successful.
What are they doing to prevent that behavior?
Well, you give multiple game suspensions, you
Okay.
require players to go through anger management courses. What's interesting this time is there were even apologies posted online
Yep,
by which isn't the norm. So Tenzin Rampa, the Milwaukee assistant coach, Mijatovic, um, both of them, which Mijatovic, I think that's been corrected now. But Steph definitely apologized and was interesting. He apologized on the MASL uh, Facebook page,
yeah.
replying to this, whereas Tenzin did it within a heavily trafficked MASL Facebook group. And so what's been interesting is fans have not been shy responding directly to people involved, and you would, in particular, Milwaukee fans, you would expect that.
You have a true love for Milwaukee fans,
Well,
Eric.
no, people say this about Comets fans, so I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's fair, and I will admit I jumped into that. I mean, really, there are fans of other teams who wanted to get involved in this, but there are enough teams that had their own incidents, and you could go way back. You go back to what many Comets fans will remember, attack fans in 1995, a fracas at Kemper Arena that involved the Kansas City Police, Baltimore, who was the Spirit at the time, and the Kansas City attack. You had the Kansas City Baltimore incident at what is now Cable Dahmer Arena that involved a headbutt in the other direction, right?
it
You
did.
also had a Cable Dahmer Arena spitting incident that involved one of the teams that was involved Saturday night, right? So
Yep,
there's enough behavior across, and those are just three. There was an incident last season, I believe, San Diego at the Outlaws that got a couple people suspended for multiple games
it
for
did.
an off the field or after game incident. And so for any fan base to do this holier than thou, my team never does anything wrong and it's always the other, that will never wash with me. And that includes Comets fans. And so I've made it pretty clear on one of the groups, unless your team has never been involved in anything, don't dare cast the first stone here because San Diego fans are wanting to jump in. And no,
I no, I agree with you. I totally agree. There's been incidents that were never ever fully reported, also that I know
sure.
about.
Well, let me just add, if you're a fan of one of these teams and you call out bad behavior on your team consistently, then I don't have a problem with you calling out behavior on another team. What doesn't work for me is defending ad nauseum your players for any bad behavior and then or excusing it and then jumping in the other way. And this whole but they started it thing, that doesn't fly either.
No, some at some point somebody has to be the better person, but it's pretty much that way with a lot of things in life right now. Politics, sports, it's
Sure, sure. But here's the
everybody
other
on the other
thing.
side's wrong. Everybody on my side's, smells like
Yep.
daisies.
Yeah, well, here's the other thing, and I thought about this today heading into this podcast is there is so much and maybe too much proximity between the league, the players, the coaches, and fans. Do you think that NFL players are on Facebook groups getting into it with fans of their team or the other team? That you would not see this.
Right.
And so there's an expectation in this league that there's immediate access. It's like if the league hasn't responded in 24 hours to a fan's comment on Facebook, somehow they're stonewalling. It's like, do you really think Roger Goodell responds to every single comment that's posted by NFL fans across the country?
Well, there is
Or
a
make it Don Garber.
scope player there. There's a scope of number of players and
Make it
coaches and
Don
fans,
Garber.
but
Make it soccer, right? And then make it, I mean, historically, granted there wasn't social media in the 80s, but the expectations that there's this level of dialogue, I think are out of whack with what you would see anywhere in any other league. And so it just fuels the fire.
no,
And
I
yeah,
I agree. I agree. I am actually quite shocked at how often players, coaches, staff members will go on to Facebook groups and have discussions and sometimes arguments. And I again, you want that level of fan appreciation, but there's a some dividing line which seems to be more counterproductive when they don't follow it. And that's why I rarely go on some of that stuff. I let you do all the posting on the Facebook groups.
Well, no, I appreciate that, but there are things I won't do. I mean,
Yeah, no, agree.
will I call out what I perceive to be hypocritical fan behavior? Absolutely. I'll call it out on Facebook. I'll call it out on this podcast. I'll call it out on
And you
air.
call it on both sides.
I
That's
call it on both sides. That's
yes,
right.
you absolutely do.
Consistently, right? And I would challenge, fans of other teams, particularly one like in cheese country, who uh, you're not going to find that level of objectivity like we at least attempt to have here
Right.
with our broadcast team. You're not going to find that level anywhere else. And so we will call things out. Now, we also have an employer, right? So there's limits in terms of what we will or won't do, but suffice it to say, um, yeah, if I see something that's not kosher in Kansas City, I'll call it out. And I've had Comets fans call me out. I've
No, yeah,
had at
absolutely.
least one Comet fan post on one of the Comets groups that they don't like me as an announcer. That's fine.
Well, you're
I,
not going to make everybody happy, Eric.
no, and I would say, hey, Brian Baczynski is pretty easy to find on in the arena. He's easy to find on email. It's like, okay, complain to him. So, um, because ultimately we're not going to please everybody, and
Nope.
if we're doing our job well, we're not a bunch of homers. You're clearly not a homer on this broadcast because even sometimes more so than I am, you will call out mistakes that you see on the field.
Yeah, and I'll just be honest. Like, okay, I'm a realist. You're a realist. I think that you have a range of things that you will say and criticize and comment. I have a little wider range because I'm not an employee.
Yep.
It's not criticizing you because you're a sellout or anything else. You are an employee. What I respect is we have a lot of announcers who are employees who are 100% homer in one direction. And again, I know you are rooting for the Comets to win. You want them to do well. You will I actually sometimes feel like you will try to um play devil's advocate a little bit. Like sometimes you'll be a little more critical just because you know that you are a bit of a homer. You're rooting for the team to win. So I sometimes feel like you're doing that, which is okay. Because and sometimes I'll argue with that because I'll play the other side at that point. I'll play devil's advocate on almost anything because I like it. But this is what a lot of I this is why I don't enjoy a lot of the other broadcasts. Like if I have the game on, I don't have the sound up. I'm just kind of watching it out of the corner of my eye or watching it very closely. That's why I do enjoy you guys. And there's other groups around the league that are better than others, but that's why I do enjoy you guys.
So I would just add that there's a subset of fans that will bring it back to everything was better in the 1980s, and if you go back to that era, there really weren't a lot of national broadcasts. I mean, if you
No.
think about it, there really weren't, and so it's not like fans in Milwaukee was in a different league at the time, so it's not like fans in Minnesota were watching Don Fortune and Jack Harry call Comets games in the 80s. They weren't, right?
Nope.
This was a local broadcast, so they didn't have to. It's not even worry. They didn't have to adjust because the viewers were Comets fans, visitor fans, and neutrals. They
Right.
were just Comets fans watching on Channel 5 in Kansas City. It's a different era that we operate in where we don't know how many fans are watching that are pro Comets, pro whatever team, or just like tuning in just because we're on.
Yeah. And personally, I think the league will grow with the more objective, again, root for your teams, but the more objective announcers you have. And, you can have balance of where one announcer is more one way and the other is the other way or whatever. I just, personally, I don't enjoy having broadcasts where teams announcers are all homers. I don't.
There's no panacea because particularly if you're a Kansas City fan of other sports, think about the Royals World Series broadcasts on Fox. Think about Chiefs games on national TV, how many times do you hear Kansas City fans complaining that the objective national
Oh, I know.
broadcasters are against? So, I mean, you're never going to get 100% of everybody happy. And
Nope.
even in an objective national broadcast, some are going to complain that they're tilted to one side or the other.
And I am just talking about myself personally.
Yep.
I would rather a broadcast be objective and informed. Again, root for your team. I have no problem with you like going, yeah, they scored. That was but or it was a great shot, but the goalie made a great save on the other team. Do that. I love that. It's you can be excited and objective and informed, and that's a kind of a perfect balance for me. But that's a rare thing, hard to do.
So would this be a time where I could preview a Comets League interview that's about to happen?
Sure, I think yeah,
So I mentioned earlier 10 for 10. It's second year of the series. We started last week with Everton Morera, Ian Bennett today. Next week's guest is going to be the one, the only Brian Budzinski. And so it's going to be not so much about how are the Comets doing
right.
on the field. I mean, there's a little bit of it, but really what I hear fans asking questions about, yeah, attendance. How do you build this team? Why Kansas City versus anybody else? And so I hope that Comets fans and fans from across the league tune in next week, because Brian's never afraid to take on any question,
Nope.
and he will tell you exactly how he feels and how he thinks. And so he will be episode 3 coming up next week, and I think that yeah, he has some interesting thoughts on a lot of topics.
Oh, he does. It's he's not afraid to say what he thinks. He's not afraid to pause for a second and think about how he wants to phrase it, to phrase it the way he wants it to come across. I don't agree with everything that he says, but I got to give him a lot of kudos for how he goes about doing it. And obviously the Comets are pretty successful on and off the field with a good team, maybe not the best team, great attendance, all that sort of thing.
Well, and I've had, depending on what hat I'm wearing, a different relationship with him. So in one sense, I report to him, right? He's the
Right.
managing partner of the Comets. Last year, I also broadcast with him when Nick had a family issue that came up, positive thing, family trip that came up. We did the UCFC game together where I was play by play and he was color. And in this case, it's a league interview where I'm representing the league, not the Comets, and he's representing the Comets. And so, um, getting a chance to talk to him from all those different touch points is just interesting in terms of what's working in Kansas City. And I read the complaints online. I mean, it's teddy bear toss delayed this week, and there were people that were really upset that this wasn't a priority earlier in the year, and that not enough notice was given. And so, it, I guarantee you, there's a question in there about the relationship with Comets fans, particularly fans who are passionate and not afraid to voice how they feel.
Yeah,
And it's sort of interesting to get his take on that.
and I know we were criticizing some of the interactions that fans and players and such forth had. But the good thing is there are a good number of very passionate fans. So that's the positive of that. Sometimes it just doesn't come across always positive.
Well, and that's been the landmark, I think, of or hallmark of Kansas City, no pun intended, is you go back to the 80s, there was a tradition of Comets fans hosting young players and
Yep,
relationships being built. I mean, you see Sporting doing this with academy players, but it was like rookie Comets players who would be staying in the spare bedroom of Comets fans, right?
yep.
So those relationships were personal and long lasting.
And there even in the latest iteration of the Comets, going to fans' houses for Christmas, to
Mhm.
have Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving
Yep.
dinner, et cetera, et cetera. So it's still there. All right.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this isn't the only city that does this. It's
No.
just, if you're talking about fan culture and that relationship and why it's so close and why it's so personal, because the fans in a very positive way look to they reach out very positively with arms wide open to players. The challenge with that is that as an organization, you're still a business, and sometimes you have to make business decisions that aren't personal. And so distilling what's a business decision versus a personal decision can be very, very tricky.
It can be. Um, all right, so we've talked about San Diego. We kind of got out of order. We've talked about the upcoming Chihuahua game. We
Yep.
talked about the little fracas, and we got
Yep.
way, way, way off tangent of where we were going to go.
We haven't
Uh,
talked about St. Louis too. That
right, there's
news drop.
Tyus.
Yeah. So Uzi out, Frank in, Jeff Machad in, and both Frank Tayu and Jeff Machad were at one point or another on the inactive suspended list, and now they're not. And so what's going to be interesting to see is how does St. Louis respond to all this, where now they're bringing players back off that list, and what is that going to mean as they look up at the eighth spot for the playoffs? They're in a really difficult position. Tacoma's in a difficult position as well, but what is it going to take to make the playoffs if you're the St. Louis Ambush? Perhaps they've decided this is a step there.
So what's up with Uzi? Do you know? I mean, did Frank refuse to play with his brother?
No, no, I don't. I
I
don't
don't
have
think so.
any. I don't have any inside intel on a decision. I will say he's been hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all I know.
So yeah, that's what I figured. It was a little bit of a half joke there, but I'm like, man, that would be a tough situation if you wanted your brother out. But I'm not saying that's what's happening. So
No, but you look at the standings, which I am right in front of me. St. Louis sitting in the ninth position with a 2-8 record, so they have 14 games left to figure this out. 1-4 at home, 1-4 away. That away win includes Kansas City, that overtime win, and so
yeah,
we're sitting at 5 points. They beat Dallas home, and Dallas could have taken them to overtime. They beat Kansas City in overtime, and Kansas City could have won that one, but they need to get a boatload of points in the second half of the season for them.
you know what is actually just surprising to me is a 2-8 record, 5 points, and they're sitting in ninth. I'm like, why aren't they in 11th? There's Texas and Harrisburg need to some get some points. Tacoma, I'm surprised at you. Come on.
Yeah, but then you look at a team like Empire that was drifting, and they're sitting in sixth. Now, granted, they played more games than everybody else, but 5-6 record, 15 points. So that means all five wins were in regulation, and they're sitting in sixth position. So there's some teams right now that are probably getting really, really nervous. Am I going to make the playoffs? We've talked multiple times this season already, Thad, about ideally getting a 1 or 2 spot.
Yeah.
But ideally, right?
Right.
But pretty soon you start trying to figure out, do we have a shot at 1 or 2, or do we just kind of do our thing and let the chips fall where they may at Front Wave Arena and hope for the best that we get a few breaks and make it to the finals.
Yeah, at this point, I'm just worried about them getting it as high as they can be, quite honestly. But
Yep.
I'm sure.
Well, there's
I'm,
quality teams, and I said on some show that it might have been MASL Monday. The team that's positively surprised me this year is the Baltimore Blast. You look at them right now; they're sitting at 7-1. That one loss was at Milwaukee. They played competitively against that. If you had told me at the end of last season that Baltimore had a legitimate shot at first place, I would have given you the weirdest look in response. That
yeah, I mean, it's just historically, there's teams you don't want to count out because they've historically been good. They might have a bad year or two, but Baltimore, Milwaukee, they may not always be at the top with, San Diego and some and Chihuahua and stuff and Monterey in the past, but historically they're going to be competitive and they find ways to do that no matter who the coach is, no matter who the players are. It might take them a year or two to get back, but they do. I mean, but I include the Comets in that too. They may not always be at the top, but they're going to find a way to be competitive towards that.
well, and then looking ahead to this weekend, St. Louis at Baltimore. That's a tough. challenge there for St. Louis on that smaller sized field. Baltimore has two winnable games at home. St. Louis on Saturday, Dallas on Sunday. UCFC two games at home at Milwaukee. I mean, there's a lot that's happening now. Dallas, you mentioned Harrisburg Heat. Dallas plays at Harrisburg Saturday before going down to Baltimore for a 12 o'clock kickoff. So a noon kickoff on Sunday. They're going to be tired.
Yeah.
Ambush then go from Baltimore to Harrisburg for an afternoon kickoff. So I think there's going to be some movement in the standings here. And it's not like we'll have it all figured out,
No.
but there's some teams on the bubble that need to make a run this weekend. Otherwise, it's just going to be harder and harder.
I think what you're going to end up seeing is there's going to be a striation in those groups, and the upper half is going to be shuffling around, and the lower half are going to be shuffling around. And I'm not sure that those two are going to cross over very much, but we will see.
We
That's
will
they got to show us.
we will absolutely see. And I guess games that could be interesting. Outlaws played San Diego pretty well last weekend. They returned to Mesquite, and San Diego still has a lot of injuries. Maybe this is a chance for the Outlaws to win their first game of the year. If not, then they're staring at 0-8. And I'm looking at Sunday night, Tacoma Stars at the Empire Strikers. Everybody's talking about Empire's tactics with the goalkeeper moving up. Tacoma's sitting at 1-5-2 with their top scoring defender on the suspended list. Somebody's got to figure it out there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're going to keep looking up at a greater distance at that eighth playoff spot.
I fully support the Strikers' new style, so I'm good with it.
Well, there you go.
I I know people think it is impossible, but I think if you have the right mix of players out there, you can make that work really well.
You're a former St. Louis guy. Can you imagine if Sloboda Iliyevsky were playing in today's world? He'd have a blast, no pun intended, in that system.
Ah, Slobo, man, one of my favorite all-time players right there.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, well, I think we're going to run out of time here shortly. We both have other obligations and free Zooms or free Zooms. But I appreciate the time, Eric. Any last words, anything prophetic, any taunts to any teams or fan groups or anything else?
No taunts, other than looking forward to seeing fans out of Cable Dome Arena. And a big shout out to Jonathan Reimer, who announced that he was stepping back as Empire Strikers color announcer. A great announcer, a great guy, and he will be missed.
Yeah, he's one of the guys I did appreciate. So, all right, we are out.